Today I want to welcome Dr. Jackie Kilraine. Dr. Jackie is the Director of Neurotechnologies at Apparenzo and the CEO of Expressing Optima and HealthyBox.me. She's an author of The Codes of Longevity and the Expressing Optima Journal. Dr. Jackie is highly skilled at solving complex problems using a very individualized approach that includes restoring energy, removing fear, regaining clarity, and helping clients look and feel 10 years younger. And she came to talk today about how we can use our brain to reverse autoimmune diseases. How can we use our brain to reverse MS in our body? So thank you so much for being here, Dr. Kilraine. How are you today?
Great. I'm very good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much. So Dr. Jackie and I are going to talk about the connection between the human brain to having multiple sclerosis or reversing multiple sclerosis. So that's a very interesting topic, and I'm super excited for this conversation. So I want to start with asking you, what does the brain have to do with multiple sclerosis?
The brain has, well, it's the master controller of everything. And when our brain does remember everything, so it keeps the score. There's and when we have trauma or just past life issues, the brain remembers it. The brain's only job is for us to survive. So if we wake up the next day and we're still alive, no matter what our health condition is, no matter how we feel, it's done its job. And every time that we experience something traumatic or stressful or an illness, it turns the volume up on the brain, and that actually turns up the volume on the immune system, and that can just cause it to lead to some autoimmune issues like MS. So until I treat a lot of women with chronic health issues and a greater preponderance of them with chronic pain. That was where I kind of started with it, had autoimmune issues. And that really led me to dive more into the research on the brain and how it controls our immunity and how we need to look at our body and our conditions that we have as a whole system and kind of step back and include the brain in that. When I started including the brain in the treatment with my women in my practice who really weren't getting better anywhere else, it made such an impact. There's lots and lots of research with the brain and immunity, and MS included.
Wow, that's incredible. I don't think many people are even aware of the connection. And to my understanding, then you focus the work that you do on the brain to basically use it as a tool to reverse the autoimmune conditions.
Correct. Yes. So there's lots of, for some of the how I started looking at the brain was I'm a chiropractor by trade, and my very first patient that came in that I remember that she had fibromyalgia, which is considered by many to be autoimmune. And all I remember at first was that she had low back pain. I went to adjust her. I'm like, do you feel better? And she's like, no, I don't feel better. And in fact, I think I feel worse. And I was like, So she literally, I felt like I could pick her up and carry her to every room. She just felt so bad. And everything in my practice for the next 20 some years revolved around trying to understand that chronic pain patient. And I remember being in my room listening to a podcast late at night, and an anesthesiologist said, we have to turn down the volume of the pain in the brain. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's it. I was doing so many things where I was trying to work on the body and I wasn't including the brain in it. I walked in my office the next day, opened up a little periodical, and there was an ad for neurofeedback. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's what I need. And I knew the doctor who owned the company. I called him up and I said, his name's Guy Annunziato. And I said, Guy, I need this. And I got trained on neurofeedback and I started using it. And I started using it for my chronic pain patients, my fibromyalgia patients. And and that was still it. I was still trying to look at their health through that little lens of chronic pain and their body pain. And they started telling me, I'm not depressed anymore. I'm going to ask my doctor if I can get off my antidepressant. I'm going to, my gut is better. I don't have these digestive issues anymore. And I'm like, really? And some of them were like, I was like, I didn't even know you were depressed. I didn't even know you were anxious, because I didn't ask those questions, because I was just trying to figure out their pain. And then, but when I stepped back and I started looking at them as a whole system and including their brain with it, and then just reading the research on the interconnection between the immune system and the brain, and the autoimmune conditions in the brain. And then I started really noticing that a lot of the women that I treated had autoimmune issues too. A greater preponderance of them had autoimmune issues. To me, it didn't really matter when we're correcting the dysregulated patterns that we see in the brain, how all of these things just got better. So, and if you have one input, like say you're anxious or you're depressed, that's going to increase your chronic pain. That's going to shut down your gut. It just is a cascade of things, but you can go in and start correcting these dysregulated patterns and just optimizing your health. So, I think that was I enjoy giving back women more control over their health too. There's lots of ways to impact your immune system and your health. And I think that's really, really necessary when we have something like MS or another autoimmune condition. Go ahead,
please.
I mean, lots of people that have autoimmune conditions have more than one. Just looking at it from not so much treating the condition as just optimizing the whole system, and then the body starts to heal itself, because that's how we're designed. We're designed to really be a self-healing organism. We just have to, there's lots of ways to jump in, lots of tools, especially in this day and age with technology the way it is. There's many, many ways to jump in and start to heal the brain. The brain has big inputs with immunity.
Yeah, this is fascinating for me. Because, there's so many, I hear it from people that I work with. I hear it in the community, like where, groups of people that have MS, and so many are just, the sentence that the doctor said after the diagnosis, you have MS and there's nothing you can do about it. It's just, taking all of their air out, like they have no hope anymore. And listening to this, is so exciting, I think. Yeah. So you talked about neurofeedback. Can you tell us more about it? What is it?
So neurofeedback is what we do is look at how your brain responds to the environment. So your brain is just a creature of habit. And like I said earlier, its only job is for you to really survive. So every time that there's a little area in your brain called the amygdala, and the volume on that just gets turned up. It's the one that's always out there looking out for a threat. And the more that it gets turned up, the more hyper state of alert that it tends to be on. And what we do with neurofeedback is you do what's called a QEEG, a quantitative EEG, and it measures the brainwave output. And what that really is basically doing is looking at how your brain responds to the environment. And what I see with mostly women who have autoimmune issues, chronic health issues, is we have what's called a beta and an alpha dysregulated pattern. So if you're in a high beta pattern, you tend to be anxious, you tend to have insomnia, you tend to have migraines, you overthink things, you just can't shut your brain off. You're always on that lookout for a threat. And that's exhausting. Beta dysregulated brains use a lot of ATP and a whole lot of energy, and you only have so much ATP to run your whole body. That's what the energy that your body uses. And if your brain is using so much of it, it's just exhausting. And that's what triggers the immune response too. So when your brain's always on that hyper state of alert, your body kind of gears up for the threat. It thinks you only have 30 minutes to live. So it heightens your immune response because you may need to heal yourself from this attack that you're going to have. It shuts down your gut. So it shuts down your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest nervous system. You don't need to digest food if you're going to die in 30 minutes. You don't really need to sleep, if you're going to do that either. So you're just put on this hyper state of alert all the time. And you kind of feel like I was like that. I thought, oh, that's just how I am. You tend to overthink things. I thought I overthought things because I'm a doctor and I have to think about everything. But no, I overthought things just because that's how my brain was, and it was exhausting. And and then you can burn out into this alpha brainwave pattern, which can cause you to feel more depressed. And you do have chronic pain. You kind of have anger. You have fibromyalgia. You have different conditions, and that's just that burned out brain, because you can only sustain that high beta. I got to go, and I'm always taking care of everybody. And and I would see that so often with women in my practice. Sometimes they'd be like, I just want to go on vacation with my family and not crash on that second day. Like maybe I could go out for one day and then I just couldn't take it anymore. And it extends out to, what we'd see is it would extend out to their children too. So you're just really, stressed out and you have to micromanage everything. That's more that high beta brain. And what neurofeedback, getting back to what you asked me, neurofeedback just is a learning modality. So when you do neurofeedback after the QEEG, you're watching TV. So you watch something like Netflix, and your brain gets rewarded when it's in a more normal pattern. So it's not on that hyper state of alert in this case. And how it gets rewarded is the picture that you're watching runs very clear and smooth and bright, and you can hear it and you can see it. And when you're in that dysregulated pattern, it gets dark and the sound goes down, and your brain figures out how to watch the movie. And when it does, it's responding better to the environment. And so then that just translates. So your brain kind of goes, oh, you mean I don't have to be up here all the time? I'm really not under that threat all the time. I'm not running from the saber-toothed tiger all the time. And it'll turn down your response to your environment. So for me personally, I used to have to have my TV on when I went to bed because I couldn't shut my brain off. It was always, thinking. And I just have the TV on to drown out my own brain, which interfered with my melatonin production, which interfered with my sleep, which interferes with your immune system. But once I started doing neurofeedback, I didn't respond like that anymore. Things that used to walk in my office that used to get me all upset or I'd get aggravated about, they still walk in my office. They just don't bother me anymore. And they never needed to in the first place, but it made perfect sense to me that they did back then. So I really look at my whole life. My whole life is pre and post neurofeedback. I used to be too anxious to get up and speak in front of a bunch of people. Don't do that anymore. And I just feel better. It's just a cascade of things. Neurofeedback is one way to quickly change the way your brain responds to the environment. So, there's lots of other ways to do it, but I think using technology like neurofeedback, and it's non-invasive, there's no side effect to it. There's no contraindication to it. And once your brain gets it, it gets it. Mine's never gone back. And I haven't intensely done neurofeedback in many years. So it's, unless I had another trauma, which was going to change how my brain responded, it likes where it's at. And I like where it's at.
I bet.
Yeah.
So are you saying that it's like a practice to something that you're going to do for a certain amount of time to basically teach your brain a new behavior until it becomes the new automatic?
Yes, exactly. And when you do neurofeedback, the reason it's called neurofeedback is your brain is actually controlling what you're watching. So I'm watching TV and my brain, if it's in a good pattern, I can see it well. If it's in a bad pattern, I don't see it well. So that's the feedback. Your brain keeps getting feedback and your brain learns how to watch the show. And when it learns how to watch the show, it's in a normal pattern, which is much healthier for you, much more, a lot less stressful. And it helps you, it helps your system in so many other ways too. So not only do you just feel better, but it actually turns down your immune system, and lets you sleep, which also helps, so many things too. Lots of things. But yeah, it's a learning modality. In our practice, we do neurofeedback is 30 minutes, and we do it a minimum of twice a week. I like 3 times a week. So some people do it every day, but 3 times a week is plenty. And your brain gets it after, a couple months of training typically. Your brain learns a new way to respond to the environment, a more optimal way. So yeah, it's very impactful.
So you talked about common behaviors, common ways that people think or do things. Can you actually see somebody or recognize certain behaviors or certain patterns in their behavior and be able to tell, yes, by working on their brain, we can actually affect the way MS or whatever autoimmune disease they have. And then, in this condition, in this situation, yes, let's work with the brain.
Right. Yes. Now, I could tell that by talking to someone, because I know what a beta dysregulated brain looks like and sounds like, or an alpha dysregulated brain looks like. But a QEEG generally all the time the QEEG is the objective test that it'll show you, yes, this is what your brain's doing. But like a beta dysregulated brain will be OCD tendencies, migraine, insomnia, anxiety, panic attacks, chronic pain. Those are signs of a beta dysregulated brain. If you're that helicopter mom that's just got to probably oversee everything and always thinking, that's a high beta brain. That's a lot of energy. And then it'll burn out to that alpha brain, which is like rumination, like I lay down at night and I just can't shut my brain off. I have chronic pain. I'm depressed. I get anger. I'm in, different things. There's a delta theta brain too, which we don't see as much in women with autoimmune issues. We see it a lot more in men, like or the ADD or the ADHD brain. You can tell pretty. I can tell pretty easily what type of brain we've got going in and how to kind of work on that. But the QEEG really gives it to you in black and white. What your brain's doing and how to fix it. But if you feel like you have to overthink all the time, or there's just, stress is just constant all the time, that's probably a sign of a high beta brain. And it'll burn out into that alpha brain because it's hard to, you don't have that much energy. And if you think about it, your brain uses about 30 to 40% of your available energy. And if it's overworking and working in this high beta brain, it uses even more. And that just leaves nothing for your body. That just kind of shuts down. You're going to shut down your gut. You're going to shut down other systems because your brain's just demanding all the energy that you have. So getting that brain to calm back down, or getting it to more normalize, is going to help bring all your other systems back online, which is going to help the function of your body. One thing I like to think about it is when, you're kind of just getting control back, and that you really don't have multiple things wrong. It's just that dysregulated nervous system that is going to impact so many systems. Like your gut, like anxiety, like depression, like your immune system. So you can take back control of those things by getting your brain back online, understanding how your whole system works, instead of just taking it like medicine likes to do and just taking you as body parts. And whenever I hear a doctor say there's nothing you can do, that's just, to me, time to find somebody else, because it's just someone who's not looking hard enough. Because there's lots of like I got just obsessed almost with trying to figure this out, because there's always a way, and there's research, especially now with technology and mapping the genome and just all the things that we're able to do. Science is just like this, coming out with awesomeness.
You're saying it's an exciting time or the right time to have autoimmune.
Exactly. Right. That is exactly.
All right. So I wanted to ask you, we know that all autoimmune diseases have direct connection to inflammation in our body. What is the connection between the brain, the way our brain operates, and inflammation?
Right. So when our brain perceives a threat, it's going to ramp up, and it never forgets. Like we said earlier, it doesn't forget. So maybe you had some childhood trauma. They don't have to be terrible things, but things all kind of add up. And even epigenetically, things get handed down from one generation to the next. So, you may have had a parent who had a real stressful life or pregnancy, or even so even preconception, you can have some issues. So the brain is always on that lookout for the threat, and when it perceives something like that, and it kind of hangs on to each one, that turns on the immune system. It feels like it's under attack, so it's going to ramp up the immune system. And if we're not like a zebra that can just, here comes the lion that's gonna get us, and we run, and then when we're away from the lion, they're back at graze and they don't think about it. We don't forget. We tend to kind of keep track of all those things, and that can just keep our immune system chronically elevated. And when your immune system's chronically elevated, then you start to develop some autoimmune issues. And just like, if you start to get insulin resistance, you start to develop diabetes, because your body just doesn't respond to the insulin anymore, because it's up all the time, up all the time, up all the time. So it's just going to go, I'm just not even going to pay attention to this anymore. And you can start to develop. Same thing with the brain, and having that fight or flight, or that stress level always turned up. It probably you could, instead of saying trauma, I should probably just say stress, because when your nervous system is stressed, it just keeps turning up that volume, which is going to turn on your immune system. So that's really the connection. There are different things, like neurofeedback's one thing, but there's brain entrainment. So there's different devices where you can just listen. There's a study with MIT and Georgia Tech and Emory on light and sound input in the brain that helps to eat up the beta amyloid plaques associated with Alzheimer's disease. But the reason it does that is it turns on certain cytokines that are help to heal and reduce the inflammation. And they're very specific, different frequencies. So sometimes just listening to a certain frequency and a sound to a certain frequency entrains the brain, and it also impacts the immune system. So that's directly impacts the immune system. So that's basically, I would definitely include the brain when I'm thinking about autoimmunity. Yeah, without a doubt.
So you're saying you're using both trauma and stress kind of on the same level in the way that it affects us in our body.
Yes.
So trauma is mostly referred to the past, and stress could be both, right? Like it can be an ongoing stress, can be stress that something that happened before.
Right.
How do you say, like, our mindset or the way that we respond to the environment, to the day-to-day life that happens outside of us could be, controlled or shifted so that we reduce the stress?
Yeah. You can do some low-tech things that you can do, is even just imagining how it would feel to feel well, or whatever you really want to feel. And now I used to do this in the morning, because the brain doesn't know the difference between what you vividly imagine and what you actually experience. So, and that's proven by lots of studies too. So, but we also know that the theta brainwaves, which are brainwaves that are when you're sleeping, that your theta is very active, and your theta converts your short-term memory to long-term memory. So if you just before I go to bed at night, I imagine what it feels like to feel joyful, to feel peaceful, to feel happy, to feel healthy, anything that you want to feel rich. I don't care what it is. But when I do that at night, my theta brain waves are active when I sleep, and they're going to help me remember that feeling. And when you do that, there's a particular area in your brain called the reticulating activating system. It starts to look for that. It thinks that that's how you are. So that's simple. Anyone can do that. I feel well. I feel healthy. I feel energetic. I feel calm. I feel peace. But it's one thing, and it's important to write it. Writing really helps. It imprints it on the brain when you physically write it, not just type it. But I think you really have to feel it, because there's so much, especially we as women, that's how we are. That's how we take in our environment. And I know it's not just women that have MS, but, when you start to really feel it, it just lights up your whole nervous system. So your brain's going to think, this is how I'm supposed to be. And it will actually look for that. And it changes how you respond to the environment. That changes just a gratitude journal, just feeling, how you want to feel starts to change how you respond to the environment. There's I can't ever remember her name, but there's a female psychologist who did a lot of studies on gratitude and well-being, and you start to respond to your environment. If you have that practice more often, you start to respond to your environment. You can even see the good and the bad, and you just kind of you really physically develop that cup half full versus half empty, and that has a lot of positive responses just in hormones in your body and how your body responds to daily life. But it's something you can train. It's something you can change. If you feel like bad things always happen to me or this or that, if you just start that 5-minute practice, I just try to keep it real simple and just do 5 minutes. Sometimes I'll do 5 things in 1 minute a piece, because it's hard for me to meditate for a long time. So I just say, okay, I'm just going to do 5 minutes, but I'm going to use my theta at night. And that's just going to super, super zoom it.
I love that you're sharing it, because there are so many things that we can do alone. Mm-hmm. And it's, for me at least, it's believing that it's going to happen, believing that it's possible for me to
Absolutely.
reach a state of health and happiness. And creating it within ourselves and not just expecting it to happen is such a powerful place to come from.
Yes, I love that too. I love having, taken control of our destiny and our health. And I think that's, it's easier to do now. We can look at, it's always been there, but now we have so much things that we can look at, that we can say, okay, this is how I respond to the environment. This is how I can change it. It's we want to rely on, that's a good place to be.
Definitely. You mentioned earlier epigenetics. Could you share a little bit what it is and how you work with that to create the shift in one's health?
Sure. So we look at, I look at, your epigenetics is, so everybody has the same genes, and your epigenetics is your expression of those genes, or how those genes react with the environment. You get one allele from your mom, you get one allele from your dad. That's your epigenetics. So your genes don't really change, but your epigenetic expression you can influence by the food you eat, by how well you sleep, by and some things it dictates in some ways how you respond to your environment. So sometimes just understanding that helps you see, oh, that's why I do what I do, and this is what I can do about it. So for instance, there's one gene that we look at that is called the GAD gene. So it controls how our body respond when we eat certain foods that are high in glutamate. Glutamate is a neuro excitatory hormone, and then we have GABA, which is calming. And it with certain people with this particular gene variant don't convert this excitatory glutamate to GABA, so they don't sleep as well if they eat grains or MSG or soy. I don't sleep as well. People with this GAD variant, which is very common, don't sleep as well, or are more anxious, or their nervous system's always stressed out. So when you understand that, if you eliminate some of these things from your diet, they're helpful. ApoE is another gene that tells how we process saturated fats. COMT is a gene that you can either be the worrier or the warrior. And you can change that. So you can turn on over 500 different genes positively if you get a good night's sleep, and 500 different genes negatively with a bad night's sleep. So just understanding how to hack your sleep is, but understanding how epigenetics lets you see how your body responds to the environment. And there's lots of things that you can do when you know that, like what drives you to eat, what makes you feel full, do you crave sweets, do you not, so it really gives you a lot of inputs. I look at the epigenetics of sleep, nutrition, supplementation, athletic performance, detox, and hormones. So there's lots of takeaways and tools that people can do to understand how their body responds to the environment. So that's one of the things that we do that's very specific, because we had to get very specific. You can't, when you have something like MS or something that people don't really understand, you can't just do what works for most people, because that's just not good enough. That's really not getting specific enough, and it's not going to, it might work, but we don't have to do that anymore. We can get very specific on how we treat our system, and not what's just kind of good for everybody. Your epigenetics are specific for you, so it gives you a lot of input on how to hack your system. I left my watch at work, but I wear a tracker, and maybe, that looks at my sleep. How well did I sleep? How deep did I sleep? And then it also looks at my stress level. So I can say, okay, I had this glass of wine last night, and this is what it did to my sleep. This is what it did to my stress. I can see how my body responds to what I do, or don't do, and I can track that. So you can get some objective feedback on the inputs that you're making and how your body responds to it. And I think the epigenetics just are a really good tool on taking the guesswork out of it. It's just your blueprint to your health and longevity. Because not only do we want to just heal something that we have going on, we want to live optimally. So you want to get past the point of, and I know that's, sometimes that can be difficult. That's one thing about mindset too, is, we really, I have an Expressing Optima journal that I give to my patients, that the first thing they do is imagine your perfect day. I want you to really start to think about what's perfect for you, not where your current situation, because we got to start giving your brain somewhere to go. And once it's got somewhere to go, it's going to look for it and it's going to find it. So, but I kind of strayed from the epigenetic part, but it's all, but the mindset part is part of your epigenetics too. So how's your dopamine, how your dopamine genes, how we can upregulate these things if they're not as optimal as they could be. There are different genes that look at the environment and how you respond to the environment. So there's a lot of endocrine disruptors in our environment. And for some of us, we have a more inflammatory response to that. And you can see that in your epigenetics too.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that we have our genes. That's basically a fact. We can change our genes. It's what we were born with. But the regulation, how they upregulate or downregulate, it's something that we can actually affect. We can influence it. And based on how we influence it, our health can show up, our immune system, our stress level.
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly it.
That's incredible by itself.
It is incredible. It's very empowering. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I say it helped me understand me. It helped me understand why I do what I do, and how to affect it, and it took the struggle out of it. I was trying to lose weight, And I lost 20 pounds in 2 months when I understood my DNA and understood my, why I eat the way I eat. And it's simple. It wasn't hard. It really just took the guesswork out of it for me and for most of my clients. It helps you understand yourself.
Incredible. Using our brain to reverse autoimmune.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jackie.
You're welcome.
Before we finish, do you have any last tips or tools that you'd like to share with our listeners? Something they can start implementing right now today?
I would start implementing that nighttime routine of really just imagining how you really want to feel. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's not as simple as that, but it's something you can do that's going to have a big impact. Really start to try to get good sleep, to understand get a tracker that you can track your sleep, or just turn down the blue light. Just do things that can start to really get a good night's sleep, because a good night's sleep is pivotal to good health. So, and just using the power of your mindset and hope, and not thinking that you're not really making a difference if you imagine yourself really being well, because you're having a real physical response just doing that, just starting with that.
Yeah. And I'm going to back this up because I've been doing this every day for a very long time, and I can tell the difference. So
that's
I
awesome.
highly recommend to all of you who are listening now or to the recording. And then Dr. Jackie, you also shared a gift with our listeners. Would you like to tell them what it is?
Yes, I have a little talk that I did on autoimmunity in the brain. And that kind of guides through a lot of what we talked about. Also the 5 minutes to change your brain is in there as well. So hopefully that'll help.
Thank you so much. It's highly
You're
appreciated.
welcome.
Thank you for your time and all the gold that you came and dropped here.
I love that. Anytime. Love being here.
Thank you. Keep enjoying your day.
Okay, you too. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.